For thousands of years, the Nile has been a river of life, a timeless artery nourishing civilizations, dictating destinies. But now, this ancient lifeline, this source of shared prosperity, is being transformed into a powder keg. A single colossal structure in the Ethiopian highlands is threatening to ignite a conflict that could dwarf any other in modern African history. As of today, in the early days of July 2025, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, stands as a testament to engineering ambition. For Ethiopia, this is a beacon of hope, a symbol of national liberation from poverty. On the other hand, for Egypt, it's an existential threat, a chokehold on its very survival. And for Sudan, well, Sudan is caught in the middle. It's a gamble for Sudan, with both promise and perilous risk. This isn't just about water. This is about power, about sovereignty, and about a future that for some means life and for others means ruin. The Nile dispute is not merely a technical disagreement over water flow. It's a collision of national identities, historical grievances, and desperate economic needs. Ethiopia is in the pursuit of hydroelectric power and development, which confronts Egypt's inherent vulnerability as a desert nation that is entirely dependent on a river that begins far beyond its borders. And Sudan's fluctuating position reveals the complex and often contradictory pressures at play. It is worth noting that for hundreds of years, Ethiopia, which is the source of 85% of the Nile's waters, was shackled by poverty, internal conflict, and a colonial-era agreement that effectively denied it the right to develop its own natural resources. The 1929 and 1959 treaties, signed when Egypt and Sudan were still under British influence, granted Egypt the lion's share of the Nile's flow, which is almost 55.5 billion cubic meters annually. The treaty also gave Egypt veto power over upstream projects. Ethiopia, in this case, was largely ignored. Now let's look at the GERD project in detail. This is a $4.6 billion project, entirely self-financed through bonds and public contributions. This is Ethiopia's defiance to colonial legacy. For Ethiopia, it's about pulling over 60 million Ethiopians out of darkness. Nearly half the population lives without electricity. At full capacity, the GERD aims to generate over 5,000 megawatts of power, more than doubling Ethiopia's current output. For Addis Ababa, this isn't just a dam. It's a symbol of self-determination, a modern battle of Adwa against poverty itself. The argument from Ethiopia's perspective is that the dam is primarily for power generation and not for consuming water. They insist that once the reservoir is filled, the annual flow downstream will largely stabilize. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has reportedly stated, even as recently as July 3, 2025, that, and I quote, "The Renaissance Dam is not a threat, but a shared opportunity," end of quote. But for its downstream neighbors, primarily Egypt in this case, that promise rings hollow. Let's take a look at Egypt for a moment. Imagine a nation where 97% of its water comes from a single river. That is Egypt for you. With a rapidly growing population of over 114 million people, Egypt is already one of the most water-stressed countries on earth. Its per capita water resources have plummeted to well below UN's water poverty threshold of 1,000 cubic meters per year. They are already around 560 cubic meters per capita annually, a number which is projected to shrink even further. For Egypt, the Nile is not merely a resource, it's an existential life force. The GERD's filling phase in particular poses an immediate and severe threat to the country. Based on Egyptian studies, they suggest that a reduction of just 1 billion cubic meters of water could eliminate over 290,000 livelihoods and lead to 430 million US dollars lost in agricultural production annually. If the filling process is too rapid during drought years, the consequences could be catastrophic. Egypt fears not just a reduction in its water supply, but a loss of control over the very rhythm of its life. The Aswan High Dam, once Egypt's guarantor of water security and flood control, could be rendered less effective. The Foreign Minister for Egypt, Abdelati, reiterated Egypt's position that negotiations had reached an impasse and that Egypt reserves the right to defend itself. And this is key, quote, the right to defend itself against the dam's potential effects. This is not just diplomatic posturing, it's a thinly veiled threat of military action. Now let's take a look at Sudan. Sudan is positioned directly downstream of the GERD. Sudan faces a paradox. On one hand, a regulated Nile flow could be a huge benefit. Less destructive seasonal flooding, more consistent water for irrigation, and most importantly, a potential surge in electricity from Ethiopia. Sudan's stance has indeed been the most ambiguous. In the long term, studies suggest that GERD could increase Sudan's GDP by 27 to 29 billion US dollars by 2060. Of course, this is through enhanced hydropower generation and irrigated culture. The Prime Minister for Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, on July 3, 2025, explicitly stated that the GERD, and I quote him, will not harm Egypt or Sudan's interests, end of quote, emphasizing the energy benefits for Sudan. However, in the short term, during the filling phases, Sudan's own dams are vulnerable to fluctuating water levels. Well, and here is the catch. Sudan needs a binding agreement to guarantee that the GERD's operations don't drown its own dams or starve its farms. Basically, what Sudan are saying is that they need a safety net. Without it, the promised benefits could turn into a disastrous liability. Clearly, they are caught between two giants trying to navigate a treacherous path that could either elevate them or completely overwhelm them. As we can see, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is more than just concrete and steel. It's a symbol of a deeper, more fundamental struggle over resources in a climate-stressed world. The push and shove over the GERD has been going on for over 12 years, and the pathway to a peaceful resolution appears increasingly narrow. There is a lack of legally binding agreement on the dam's filling process and operation, especially during drought conditions. This leaves the region teetering on the brink. This isn't merely a regional dispute, it's a bellwether for global water conflicts. The Nile, once a symbol of unity and life, could become a flashpoint for the next devastating war. And unlike many conflicts, this one is fought over the most fundamental element of human survival, water itself. So, as Ethiopia inaugurates its magnificent new dam, remember this: the triumph of one nation's dream could very well be the catalyst for another's nightmare. The water flows, but the peace is anything but certain.